From the digital media classroom here at Wellington High School, welcome to another episode of Dialogue with the Dukes. I'm your host, Bill Berger, and today's show is being brought to you by the Charmed Farmhouse, located at 126 West Herrick in downtown Wellington. We have talked in previous episodes for Thrive and the Mind, Body, Spirit Project. We've talked about the use of opioids or misuse of opioids and other drugs and so on. Today we're going to talk about another subject that has to do with things that are maybe as, in fact, I think just as important or just as damaging, and that is underage drinking. I'm going to make a declarative statement, which I think my English teacher from way back in high school would say. Let's face it, simply put, underage drinking is illegal. It's a fact. So here to talk to us today, we have Mr. Mark Johnson. He is the Chief of Behavioral Health of the Mental Health, Addiction, and Recovery Services outfit out of the Board of Lorain County. Welcome, Mr. Johnson. Good to have you here today. As we said, underage drinking is illegal. If for no other reason, why is it illegal?
Sure. Thank you, and thank you for having me here. I appreciate this
Sure.
time and this focus. So, alcohol and drinking underage has been researched and discussed for decades. It's still researched and discussed to this day, and really the decision to make this illegal came from that research, came from that really with a focus on health and wellness.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's obviously, we talk about legal issues. What are some of the consequences of illegal drinking, underage drinking, for not only the person who does it, the student who does it, but the parents also? Sure.
And oftentimes we think it's not that big a deal, I won't get caught, or even if I do, there's not that much that they can do to me. And that's just not true. So a misdemeanor charge, for example, or even just to be found drinking underage can mean loss of some scholarships. It can mean academic probation, a suspension from sports. You can be kicked off a sports team or other extracurricular activities. If you break the law, it's possible that you can also be denied a license later on in a field that you want to practice in. So healthcare or criminal justice or education. Many employers do a background check. And so if you have something on your record, it can impact your ability to get a job, or if you're currently working, a charge or a conviction or an impact to your driver's license can result in you losing that job that you already have. Keep in mind, you could also be sued, or your parents could be sued. So if something happens as a result of drinking, somebody gets hurt, property gets destroyed, you can actually face a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. Parents who serve alcohol or allow underage drinking to take place can face a $1,000 fine, 6 months in jail, and not only can the alcohol or the money that was involved be confiscated, but property that was involved in that can be confiscated as well. Mm-hmm. And as we mentioned for youth, impact on employment, a parent's job and employment could be impacted by charges found against them for serving underage youth. So with all those legal aspects then, and you have to defend yourself, hiring an attorney to do that can be $2,000, $25,000 or more. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of consequences that can come from either legal or just being found to be drinking underage.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll be talking about the parents and their role in this, shall we say. But from a student level, I'm glad you brought up the fact that with the inner Google these days, everything follows you. It doesn't matter what happens in your life, and even if you just make some kind of a tweet or something like that, it's going to be logged somewhere. And as you said, there's a situation where it could cause you employment problems. It could cause you scholarship problems. It could cause you even problems to get into college. If you could speak just a little bit more about that from a student level.
Sure. You know, everything gets taken pictures of and everything gets posted somewhere. And we think that that's fun. There have been cases of athletes and a good number of athletes from sports teams being found at a party, having pictures. That comes to the attention of the school, and the school has to act on that. Mm-hmm. And they lost their eligibility to play sports.
Yeah.
When we think of underage, not only is it high school, but it's also college age and even middle school age. And so those things coming to light, if you're living on a college campus, anything that happens there is fair game for that school to then decide you're not going to be able to stay here at the school, or we're going to put you on probation. So just being found to be drinking underage can result in those problems.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've certainly looked at the legal aspect of it, but there's more to it. Drinking alcohol, especially underage, you're going to have a problem, possibly have a problem with your health, and there's other aspects of it. And now we bring up that term that we always hear all the time. It's called binge drinking. What is binge drinking?
Sure. So binge drinking, simply put, is drinking a larger amount of alcohol at any one given time. The result of binge drinking from a technical standpoint is getting to a blood alcohol content of 0.08. That's the same blood alcohol content for a driving under the influence conviction in the state of Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest areas of discussion for this with underage drinking is that 90% of drinking that happens with those who are underage does fall into the realm of binge drinking.
Mm-hmm.
So as compared to somebody who's 21 or over and having a drink or drinking at a rate that's not binge drinking, those under 21 are binge drinking.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, 90% of the alcohol consumed by those under 21 falls into that realm of binge drinking.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we've seen just recently 2 or 3 colleges that I can think of have fraternity situations where they're maybe a pledge situation where they're binge drinking, and it's resulted in death. And of course, who's liable? Well, the fraternity's liable. The people in the fraternity are liable. Their parents are liable. So there's a lot of legal issues involved, especially with this term called binge drinking. Well, there's another misconception out there, I think. We have the idea that, well, alcohol is no big deal. We keep hearing about people that, oh, when I'm drunk, I'm really happy, or when I'm drunk, oh, I'm a really mean drunk. Alcohol is a depressant, is it not?
So that's correct. Alcohol is a depressant, and that doesn't seem to make sense for people who have that experience or say those things. Mm-hmm. And what actually is happening is the alcohol depresses aspects of your brain. And so starting with those aspects of your brain that we may call inhibitions, or that really are helping us to think out what we do. Mm-hmm. So they impact our decision making first, and that's a depressant aspect of alcohol on the brain. So I think as we look at that, the idea is then, as that goes on, the depressant aspect of alcohol then impacts your central nervous system. So the more and more you drink, the more and more that has an impact, and then you're making worse and worse decisions, or it's lowering inhibitions that seem fun, but then also can result in some negative outcomes, mm-hmm. Making poor decisions with some bad results.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's another misconception out there, and we've talked about it with the other Thrive episodes that we've had, about how you can overdose on drugs. You know, in Narcon, we've talked about that and so on. But is alcohol, can you overdose on alcohol?
Yes. And I'm glad you're discussing that in relation to other drugs as well, because we think of that with other drugs and we hear about that with other drugs. But if you think about it in the same way, yes, you can overdose on alcohol. And we usually think of that as, well, passing out or sleeping it off. And that's not accurate. Is sleeping it off is not just, oh, I'm going to sleep and when I wake up I'll be fine. You're actually overdosing on alcohol. Alcohol poisoning is something that you can die from. Mm-hmm. At high levels, again, being a depressant, at those high levels it can depress the functions of your body, and those functions of your body can start to shut down, and that can result in death. Passing out does not mean this is over. So, okay, they were drinking and they passed out, okay, they're done, they'll sleep it off. Or even before that, saying, okay, we got to sober up, drinking coffee or taking a cold shower or go get some fresh air or things like that, that doesn't actually sober you up, because the process of absorbing the alcohol and the process of metabolizing the alcohol doesn't stop when you're asleep. It doesn't stop when you're more accurately passed out and unconscious. So that continues to happen, and that blood alcohol content continue to rise as you are. So if you expect that somebody is overdosing on alcohol, it's really important to get them medical help and call 911. The examples you gave earlier about fraternity houses getting in trouble, those come to light because of deaths. People die, and that comes to light that there was alcohol poisoning. And the really sad part about many of those stories is nobody called for help, or they did many, many hours later, and it was too late.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up. What is the most important thing, anybody, whether it be a student or a parent or anything like that, what is the most important thing they can do as far as helping that individual?
Sure, really it's getting medical attention and putting aside your fears. The debate is, I need help, what if I'm going to get in trouble? What if I call? What's going to happen to me? And you need to prioritize, and you need to put aside the I might get in trouble, as opposed to this person could really be in medical jeopardy and even die.
And you call
911.
There you go. Another misconception, I think that people say that, well, you know, alcohol is no big deal. It's not as harmful as other drugs are, as we've talked about on other Thrive programs, with opioids and so on, and the use of Narcan and things like that. But as I said, a lot of people think, well, alcohol is no big deal. I see my parents using it all the time. Yeah, it's no big deal. It's not harmful, as drugs are. Is that true?
In general, no. The issue really comes down to the underage drinking and the aspects of how this is being done, and knowing that 59% of the drinking 57% of underage drinkers are drinking more, and in that binge drinking category, tells us that this is risky. As we develop throughout our childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, they found that the brain isn't fully developed until about age 25.
Yeah, good point.
And so as your brain is developing, anything you're putting into it that has an impact on it, like alcohol does, will have an impact on that development. Obviously the concern is the more drinking, the more impact on the brain. And we found things when it comes to risk. So for teens who are drinking, start drinking under the age of 16, they're 5 times more likely to develop alcohol abuse or dependence as they get older. So we look at those risk factors, and if that puts us at risk, how do we mitigate that risk? How do we lower that risk? Well, delaying the start of drinking until the legal age of 21 actually reduces that risk significantly. And then all those other risks that go with it. Teens are more likely than any other group to be killed in an alcohol-related crash. So being in these risk categories, it's really important to realize that we think of these drugs as worse. And rather than thinking of them as worse or better, we need to look at the risk in general and say, hey, what happens if I? And what we've seen is that a lot of the research, a lot of the statistics show bad things happen.
Now, a true or false statement. Beer and wine are not harmful. They are not alcohol.
Well, false.
Okay.
So there are some people,
I knew that was going to be the answer.
Yeah, there are some people that think, oh, alcohol means that bottle of liquor, and beer is an alcohol, or other malt beverages aren't alcohol. They are. They have alcohol in them, so there's alcohol content in them. There's alcohol content in that liquor bottle. So realizing that alcohol is alcohol is alcohol. It's in different quantities and different things, and being aware of that's important. In general, a beer, 12 ounce, a glass of wine, 5 ounce, and a shot of liquor, 1 ounce, are all about the same alcohol content. But even that's not entirely accurate, because there are some beers with higher alcohol content than others. There are wines with higher alcohol content with others, and there are bottles of liquor that have higher content of alcohol than others. So that's a guideline, but not entirely accurate.
Well, before we end this first segment, I want to talk about a program that's coming up very soon. It's called We Are the Majority. What is We Are the Majority?
Sure. So one of the misperceptions that you brought up, A common misperception is everybody drinks, meaning all kids drink. It's what we do. It's a rite of passage, and that's not accurate. That's one of those things that we just kind of say and assume, and when we really look at it, by surveying high schoolers and middle schoolers as well, it's not accurate. So we are the majority really stresses the fact that people who are not drinking, teens who are not drinking, are not the minority, they are the majority. Mm-hmm. We found in Lorain County, so doing those surveys, juniors and seniors, 3 out of 4 juniors and seniors, when they were asked, hey, have you drank in the last 30 days, said no. Mm-hmm. So recognizing as a regular, that's not what we do. Mm-hmm. Other research shows that as many as 80% of 12 to 20-year-olds are reporting the same thing, that they're not drinking on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So we are the majority as a rally. This is actually statewide. We're going to be a regional center here in Lorain County. So there'll be a lot of stuff up on the screen, as well as live and in person at the activity. This is being held May 10th at 6 o'clock, and it's going to be located at the train station at Black River Landing. Everyone's invited. You don't have to be on an invitation list, but you're invited to be part of this rally where the Mental Health Addiction Recovery Services Board of Lorain County is partnering with LACADA to put this on. It's going to be a huge event that really supports the fact that most youth are not drinking. And this is a way to go out, have fun, support that, and do something that's a fun event that is not related to alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked a lot about the legal aspects of it, what beer and wine and liquor or the misuse thereof for underage drinking and so on. And when we come back after this message, we'll talk about parents and what they can do in this situation of underage drinking. This is Dialogue with the Dukes.
Say hello to Charm Farms, one of Wellington, Ohio's small yet versatile small businesses. The Charm Farmhouse is a wonderful establishment run by Miss Hudson. Charm Farms is a small yet charming store that sells many kinds of decor and clothing. Charm Farms is a charming store. That cannot be a coincidence, it's just too fitting to be one. This small business sells many kinds of wonderful decorations for every home. The store's atmosphere is a wonderfully cozy atmosphere. The smallest knickknacks and scents really feel like they do belong, especially in your own home. There is not a place where any decoration from the Charm Farmhouse could be out of place, and they have been made to be put anywhere and still fit any theme.
We hope that if you have something in the way of decor for your home or clothing itself, visit the Charmed Farmhouse located at 126 West Herrick in downtown Wellington. During the first portion of the interview that we're having with Mr. Mark Johnson, we talked about the legal aspects and so on, and underage drinking and definitions and so on. But now there's one other thing which we've always talked about with the other Thrive programs with drugs and opioids and things like that, and that's the parent, and how the parent is involved in talking with your students about underage drinking and so on. The parents themselves, the adults, they really need to talk to their students, don't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. So contrary to what we always say about peer pressure, when surveyed, again, the #1 influence on a youth's decision to drink or not is actually their parents. They list that as the #1 factor on influencing their decision. Mm-hmm. So even if it doesn't seem like it, parents, they do hear you.
Now, when you talk, and I'm saying this parents now, when you talk to your students, you need to be consistent about your messaging. How do you approach the situation? If you think there might be a problem, how do you approach it, and how do you actually try to communicate with the students themselves?
Sure, sure. So I think it's important for parents to decide what's the underlying message that we want to convey to our kids, and are we doing that? Are we consistent with that? So giving the message that, bluntly, you don't approve of underage drinking. It's not something you approve of. And pairing that with showing that you're concerned about their health and their well-being and their happiness. So that underlying message of why you're broaching this topic. showing that you're a good source of information about alcohol, that you know what you're talking about and you can back some of what you're talking about up. Not with charts and graphs, not with PowerPoint presentations, but keeping it pretty straightforward and simple. And this doesn't have to be 2-hour lecture, but can be done low-key, pacing yourself, doing it consistently, not just one fell swoop.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, the fact that it needs to be low-key. You can't be the authoritarian, I think that's the correct word.
Sure.
You can't talk down to the student. You need to, kind of come to a middle level, shall we say. I think that's the best thing to do.
Sure. And I think keeping it consistent also then is letting your kids know, I'm going to notice. I am keeping track of it. I'm going to keep an eye on you. I'm going to check in with you. I'm going to keep track of the beer and the liquor in the house, so that they know that if they are tempted, that odds are they're going to get caught. And again, you're consistent in saying, I don't approve of this, and so I'm going to be keeping an eye on this. Giving your kids the skill set to resist peer pressure, because just because
excellent point.
we said earlier that it's not the #1 factor, it still is a factor. And so helping your kids out with that, so that they can resist that peer pressure, because they know they've got your support as well.
Well, but as a parent, you've got to set an example. You have to.
Right.
You can't say one thing and do something else.
So being consistent is important. So having those conversations, saying those things, but then being aware at the same time, are you saying or doing things that show your kids that you drink when you've got a rough day? And you make a comment like that doesn't seem very important, but it is. Do you say or do things to show your kids that you focus on drinking, or you're even encouraging people to drink more as a fun thing? Do you tell those stories about drinking that are fun and glorify that, and your kids are aware of that? There's so many times that we give mixed messages, and in this topic, saying I don't want you drinking, but then giving a mixed message of what you say outside of that conversation or what you do outside of that conversation may be unintentional. You need to be aware of that. You need to pay attention to that and model the responsibility that you want to see.
Well, in our last episode of Dialogue with the Dukes, when we were talking with the student council representative and their advisor, we talked about something that's going to take place here at Wellington High School very soon. It's called the mock crash. And they're going to be talking about what can happen in situations both for graduation and for the prom. And there's a great quote here. It's called, "Parents who host lose the most." Is that true?
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. And this goes to that liability, this goes to those legal issues. We know that with prom coming up and graduation coming up, there are parties, and those parties are located somewhere. And again, it's against the law for an adult to provide alcohol to an underage drinker that's not their own child. If you're doing that, if you're hosting, that liability then comes with that. Understandably, logically, there are some parents that think, well, I'd rather have them doing that here with me in my house than somewhere else. That doesn't change that law. Your logic and your rationale doesn't change that law. And again, it's not entirely accurate, because as you do that, the actions of those kids then, anybody who gets hurt, anybody that damages property as a result, later on at the prom, at a graduation party, comes back on that parent who hosted. So they do lose the most. The increased likelihood of children having a problem with drinking later on comes with that early experience. So what we know is that providing that safe environment doesn't necessarily teach responsibility. There are a lot of studies that show those are actually kids that then are drinking more outside of the home as well.
So how do you host a safe party?
Sure. So supervision, the consistent message, securing alcohol. So if you're hosting that party, refuse to serve somebody who's under 21. And you make that statement, you make that clear. You make sure alcohol's not being brought onto your property then, that it's not coming into your home. People aren't bringing their own.
Sure.
So being able to supervise that. Talking with the other parents so that you have their enlisted support for, hey, this is going to be the rules at this party, and we're not going to have this available. Not making alcohol the focus of the party. If you do have a party and there are adults there, graduation, for example, you've got your extended family, many people over 21, and you are going to have alcohol. Making sure that's not the focus of the party. There's other things going on with it, and you're putting that alcohol in a location where it can be supervised and monitored, so that people aren't able to just sneak into the fridge or sneak into a cooler and serve themselves and put it in a red Solo cup, and think that nobody's going to know it.
Exactly. Well, for parents or students or both who have questions about watching this interview and have questions about underage drinking, where can they go to find more information?
So we have a lot of information on alcohol, other drugs, specific to prom and graduation parties. All the things that we've talked about are on our website at mharslc.org. And that stands for the Mental Health Addiction and Recovery Services Board of Lorain County.
Okay, very good. Well, we'd like to thank Mr. Mark Johnson for coming in and talking about another problem. And there just seems like there's so many problems that face students these days, but that being underage drinking. We'd like to thank you very much for coming in and sharing your insights and what can be done both from a student point of view and from the parental point of view. We will be back again very soon with another episode of Dialogue with the Duke.